A secret one-page memo, a bag of cash pushed across a restaurant table, and a sitting federal judge who allegedly saw it all happen and then looked the other way. Tonight, we go inside the deep-seated corruption scandal rocking the Department of Justice and why it could lead to the first judicial impeachment in decades. This is the story of how power is protected in Washington. Let's play this clip.
Sure. Thanks, Caroline. So on the Holman investigation, can you just speak to, did the president ask the Justice Department to close the case, and does Holman have to return the $50,000?
Well, Mr. Holman never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight, number one. Number two, this was another example of the weaponization of the Biden Department of Justice against one of President Trump's strongest and most vocal supporters in the midst of a presidential campaign. You had FBI agents going undercover to try and entrap one of the president's top allies and supporters, someone who they knew very well would be taking a government position months later. Mr. Holman did absolutely nothing wrong. And even the president's Department of Justice, even Kash Patel's FBI, looked into this just to make sure. They had a number of different prosecutors and FBI agents who looked into this. They found zero evidence of illegal activity or criminal wrongdoing. In the White House and the president stand by Tom Holman 100% because he did absolutely nothing wrong, and he is a brave public servant who has done a phenomenal job in helping the president shut down the border.
Let's start with a bag of takeout food. It wasn't just any food. It was a bright yellow takeout bag from a Cava restaurant in Texas. But inside that bag, there wasn't a Mediterranean bowl or a side of pita. Inside that bag was $50,000 in cash. And according to new reports, that bag of cash was pushed across a table as part of an undercover FBI sting operation. The target of that operation was a man named Tom Holman. You might know him as the border czar. The reports indicate that back in September 2024, the FBI was testing a tip that Holman was on the take. They used a former colleague of his to arrange a meeting. The goal was to see if Holman would accept money in exchange for steering federal contracts toward private businesses, things like detention centers and private security. The FBI agents, posing as contractors, pushed that $50,000 bag across the table. And according to the reporting, Holman took it. He still has it. But here is where the story turns from a bribery scandal into something much more serious for our legal system. During the presidential transition in early January, a one-page internal memo was prepared by senior officials at the Department of Justice. This memo laid out exactly what the FBI had found, that the man tapped to be the border czar had been caught in a $50,000 bribery sting. That memo was handed to a senior DOJ official named Emil Bove. People in the room at the time say Bove looked at the memo, grimaced, and rolled his eyes. Bove was a former criminal defense lawyer for Donald Trump. He knew exactly how bad this looked. But instead of sparking an investigation or a withdrawal of the appointment, the reports suggest the information was buried. Tom Holman was granted a security clearance, and Emil Bove was later rewarded with a lifetime appointment as a federal judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. This development is urgent because it strikes at the heart of judicial integrity. If a sitting federal judge helped cover up a bribery scandal involving a high-level official before he took the bench, it raises a fundamental question. Should he remain on that bench? This isn't just a political argument. It is a question of good behavior, which is the constitutional standard for holding a judicial office. We have to look at how we got here. The transition team for the incoming administration made a very specific, documented choice. They decided not to use the FBI for background checks on hundreds of incoming officials. Presidential transition law usually requires these agreements. Instead, the team, led by Susie Wiles and Howard Lutnick, opted for private background investigators. This was a scheme reportedly pushed by Boris Epstein. They didn't even sign the standard FBI agreement until December 3rd, leaving only a few weeks to vet hundreds of people. The consequence of that choice is now clear. Individuals with active FBI bribery files were allowed to walk through the front door of the White House. To understand why the Bove and Holman situation is so explosive, we have to understand the tools the government usually uses to fight this kind of thing. For decades, the Department of Justice had a specific unit for this, the Public Integrity Section, or PIN. This section was created in 1976, right after the Watergate scandal. Its job is simple but tough: combat political corruption at all levels of government. It has exclusive jurisdiction over the prosecution of federal judges. But recently that section has been described as mothballed or chloroformed. When you don't have a functional public integrity section, you don't have a watchdog for the watchdogs. This matters because the laws governing public corruption are complex and have been built up over a century. We have the mail and wire fraud statutes from 1872. We have the Hobbs Act from 1934, which is used to prosecute extortion under color of official right. We have the RICO Act from 1970. These laws were designed to ensure that the public has a right to honest services. That means you, as a citizen, have a right to a government that isn't being bought and sold in kava bags. But those laws only work if the people in charge of the Department of Justice actually want to enforce them. When senior officials are the ones allegedly rolling their eyes at evidence of bribery, the system breaks down. Now, some might say that Émile Beauvais is safe because he is now a federal judge. Under Article 3 of the Constitution, these are lifetime appointments. But lifetime doesn't mean no matter what. The Constitution says judges serve during good behavior. And there is a clear historical precedent for what happens when a judge is accused of taking part in a bribery scheme. That precedent is the story of Alcee Hastings. His story is one of the most remarkable and controversial in American legal history. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter appointed Hastings to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. He was the first black federal judge in Florida's history, but just 2 years later, he was caught in an FBI sting operation. The allegations were that Hastings conspired with an attorney named William Borders to solicit a $150,000 bribe. In exchange, Hastings was supposed to give a lenient sentence to two brothers who had been convicted of racketeering. Borders was caught red-handed with $25,000 of that bribe money. Here is the twist. Hastings went to a criminal trial in 1983 and was acquitted by a jury. He walked out of that courtroom a free man and went back to his bench. But the story didn't end there. The Judicial Conference of the United States did its own investigation. They concluded that Hastings had actually committed the crime and then lied about it under oath during his trial to get the acquittal. In 1988, the House of Representatives took up the case. Even though he had been found not guilty in a criminal court, the House impeached him by a massive vote of 413 to 3. The Senate then held a trial and convicted him on 8 articles of impeachment, including bribery and perjury. He was removed from the bench in 1989. The lesson from the Hastings case is vital for today. Impeachment is not a criminal process. It is a remedial process. Its purpose isn't to send someone to jail, but to protect the integrity of the office. As House managers argued during the Hastings trial, impeachment is about removing someone who is unfit for a position of public trust. If Judge Émile Beauvais' alleged role in concealing a bribe is proven, the fact that it happened shortly before he was sworn in may not protect him from the same fate. The actual process of removing a judge is rare and difficult. In over 220 years, the Senate has only completed 11 trials for judges. The process starts in the House, which acts like a grand jury. They vote on articles of impeachment. If a majority votes to impeach, the judge is effectively indicted. Then it moves to the Senate, which acts as the court. This is a serious, somber affair. Every senator has to stand up and take a special oath to do impartial justice. Because these trials take so much time and the Senate has other work to do, they often use what's called a Rule 11 committee. This is a group of 12 senators, 6 from each party, who listen to the evidence and the witnesses so the full Senate doesn't have to sit through weeks of testimony. We've seen this play out with other judges like Walter Nixon and G. Thomas Porteous. Judge Porteous was removed in 2010 for things like taking gifts from bail bondsmen and making false statements to the Senate and the FBI. The charges against Porteous are actually quite similar to what is being alleged in the Homan and Bove scandal. Article 2 of the Porteous impeachment focused specifically on a long-standing pattern of corrupt conduct and soliciting things of value while taking official actions that benefited the people giving the gifts. The documented facts in the current scandal are piling up. We have the FBI sting details, we have the description of the internal DOJ memo, we have the documented policy of the transition team to bypass FBI vetting, and we have the public statements from the administration. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has called the reports a hoax and claimed Homan did nothing wrong. Tom Homan himself has denied taking the money, though he hasn't explained why the FBI believes they have him on tape accepting a bag of cash. Homan recently told an interviewer that he has recused himself from contract discussions to avoid any conflict of interest. But he also admitted he took a huge pay cut to come back to government and that he doesn't care what people think about him. Meanwhile, the current Attorney General, Pam Bondi, was asked directly by Senator Adam Schiff if she would release the video or audio of the Homan sting. She refused to answer, instead attacking Schiff and telling him to talk to Director Patel. This lack of transparency is causing a massive amount of friction in the federal courts. A senior federal judge, Colleen Collar-Cotelli, recently blasted the Trump DOJ for what she called vindictive behavior. They were trying to perform a warrantless search of files belonging to James Comey's lawyer. The judge told the DOJ to go get a search warrant, which is a basic principle of law that they seem to be trying to bypass. We are also seeing Chief Judge Boasberg in D.C. doggedly pursuing the administration over its use of the Alien Enemies Act to disappear people and move them away from federal court oversight. These judges are currently the only line of defense for the rule of law, while the Department of Justice accounts are reportedly being used to preemptively clear the administration of any wrongdoing related to the Epstein files or other scandals. There is a deep irony in all of this. For years, the federal government has used honest services fraud to go after local and state officials for much smaller bribes. In the 1970s, there was a major push to clean up machines and rings that were siphoning off public money. Prosecutors like Herbert J. Stern made names for themselves by using the Hobbs Act to attack local corruption in New Jersey. The Supreme Court has consistently upheld these laws, saying that the federal government has a spending clause power to make sure that federal funds aren't being used for bribes. They've ruled that even if a bribe doesn't involve federal money directly, it's still a federal crime if the organization involved gets more than $10,000 in federal funding. But now the focus is shifting back to the federal level. We are looking at potential corruption within the very department that is supposed to prosecute it. If a DOJ official can simply roll his eyes at an FBI file and then get promoted to a judgeship, the entire structure of public integrity is at risk. This brings us back to the question of what happens next. If the House moves to investigate Judge Emil Bove, they have a massive amount of material to work with. They can look at the internal FBI memo. They can look at the yellow bag evidence from the Homan sting. They can look at the security clearance process that allowed Homan into the White House despite the sting. And they can look at the precedent of Judge Samuel B. Kent and Judge Thomas Porteous. These trials showed that the Senate is willing to remove judges for high crimes and misdemeanors that include making false statements to the FBI or engaging in corrupt schemes. The stakes couldn't be higher. The judicial branch was designed to be independent of political influence. That's why judges get lifetime appointments, so they don't have to worry about the next election. But that independence relies on the public's trust. As the Association of the Bar of the City of New York once said, where public confidence is at issue, what people think is true may be as important as what is true. If the public believes that the judiciary is a place where political favors are rewarded and bribery is covered up, the system loses its legitimacy. The purpose of the federal bribery statute is to put every official on notice that society demands complete honesty. It is meant to substitute the will of the public for the will of an interested person who has a bag of cash to give away. As we move into 2026, the intersection of law and politics is getting more crowded every day. We have secret memos, missing Epstein files, and judges who are becoming central characters in political scandals. The question for the American people is whether our institutions are strong enough to hold themselves accountable. History shows that the Senate and the House can act when they have to. They removed Alcee Hastings. They removed Thomas Porteous. They even forced the resignation of Samuel Kent. The mechanism for accountability exists. The sole power of impeachment is there for a reason. Whether it is used in this case depends on the facts. And those facts are currently being fought over in the halls of the DOJ and in the courtrooms of D.C. and Florida. We will be watching to see if that one-page memo finally gets the light it deserves. Because in a democracy, the only thing more dangerous than a bribe is the person who sees it and does nothing. To help clear up this complex topic, think of the federal government like a high-end restaurant. The judges and cabinet members are the staff. The good behavior clause is the employment contract. If a waiter sees another staff member stealing from the register and helps them hide the money, it doesn't matter how good their service is, they've broken the contract. In Washington, the register is the public trust and the contract is the Constitution. When that trust is broken, the only way to save the restaurant's reputation is a very public firing. That is the state of our political news tonight, factual, urgent, and focused on the rule of law. We will continue to track the developments of the Homan bribery scandal and the potential impeachment of Judge Emile Bove as more documents come to light. This is about more than just one bag of cash. It's about the integrity of the bench for generations to come.